Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another webinar hosted by Mediation Initiative on the topic of mediation. Today, we have with us a very senior mediator who has been practicing mediation for more than 15 years now. I actually have his bio in front of me, and it is difficult to, I don't know where to start from, but just to give you an idea of who he is, his name is AJ Jawad. When I first met him, of course, because of his seniority, I addressed him as Jawad sir, but he said, no, Mihir, you just address me as Jawad. And despite knowing the age gap later on, I said that's why I was calling you a sir. He said, no, you stick to Jawad. So if any of you feel that I am not being respectful to him, no, that is not true. I respect him tremendously, and I look up to him for everything related to mediation, and I have discussed some litigation issues with him as well. He has an excellent grasp of the law, and of course, he's an extremely experienced mediator as well. He is a digital dispute resolution specialist certified by ADR ODR International. He is partner and head of ADR services at KD Lex Chambers LLP based in Gurgaon, but Jawad is based in Chennai. He is also a global faculty for ADR ODR International. He is a senior mediator trainer with the Mediation and Conciliation Project Committee of the Supreme Court of India, and also the Tamil Nadu Mediation and Conciliation Center at the Madras High Court. He has experience in conducting basic and advanced training in mediation, as well as training and of trainers for the MCPC and the TNMCC. He is also the co-founder and former trustee of the Foundation for Comprehensive Dispute Resolution based in Chennai. So when I approached him about this topic, he just asked me to suggest a topic. And today's topic might seem very basic, but no, it is so crucial to all of us who practice mediation, because having the right skills and techniques is extremely important. You might have a mediator mindset, but you also need to have the proper tools to conduct a proper mediation. And with this in mind, I requested him whether he could give a short webinar on this topic of mediation skills and techniques. The full-length mediation skills and techniques training program could stretch over several hours, but we are going to try and address some crucial, essential skills and techniques involved in mediation over the next 45 minutes to 1 hour or so. So with this in mind, Mediation Initiative being a firm which offers mediation training, mediation services, and mediation consultancy, especially in dispute system design. We take this webinar ahead with Mr. AJ Jawad, a senior mediator, advocate, and of course, a mediation trainer. And I request Jawad to take this webinar ahead. Jawad, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mihir. Mihir very subtly reminded me how old I am actually. Okay, so thanks. Thanks for the nice introduction, by the way. And I'm happy to see a lot of my friends here. I see Sonal, I see Taruka, I see Rohit and Amin Bhai and so many others. So thank you very much. You may have heard me before on this topic, so I don't want to sound very repetitive. And as Mihir said, the topic is such that, basically we are trying to condense into 45 minutes what lasts for about at least 40 hours. So I'll try my best to see how I can do justice to this. And so basically, let's start with an understanding of what mediation is all about, because I see a lot of experienced mediators here, so you must be aware. This is what exactly is mediation all about. This is more for those who are not acquainted with the mediation process. So we are all well aware of how dispute resolution generally takes place in most jurisdictions. You have a dispute, you go to the court, you file your plaint, and then the other side is summoned by the court and they come and file their response. And then there's the issues are framed and then the trial goes on. Now, mediation basically doesn't work on those lines, because there are two things that differentiate mediation from the adversarial process that we see in the courts. One, it is a consensual process. Like if you get a summons from the court, you have no option but to go before the court. But if somebody invites you for a mediation, you can always say no. And not only you can say no to take part in the process, but even if you have taken part in the process, even at your behest, if the process has taken place, if you find that it doesn't suit you or it's taking you nowhere, you have the freedom to walk out of it. So in essence, to put it in one word, it's a completely voluntary process. While explaining this voluntariness to parties when they come for mediation, I always tell them that yes, you have the freedom to walk out of this at any time, but I would urge you to take that decision after thinking enough about it, because you are going to be in a seat of power. You are going to be deciding how you want to resolve your dispute yourself. If you walk away from here, that power is going to go into the hands of somebody else who is going to decide how your dispute should be resolved. So that takes us to the next thing, that mediation is all about self-determination. So it is in the hands of the disputing parties to decide how they want to resolve it. A mediator does not have the power to impose a decision upon the parties. Mediator doesn't have the power to tell the parties that, look, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? Of course, a mediator may sit and discuss with the parties different options on how they would like to resolve it, but mediator has no power to tell them what to do. So that is the voluntariness and the self-determination are very integral ethical aspects of mediation, and those cannot be compromised at all. Another important facet of mediation is that now you see in an adversarial setup, like for example in the court, there's a lot of suppression of information. There's a lot of distortion of information. The way the information is presented might be completely different from what it is. And it is only somebody's perception of what it is that is presented to the court, and it's left to the judge to decide as to who's right and who's wrong. But in a mediation, parties are expected to come up with a lot of information that might be very confidential. Because being a collaborative process, because two people are sitting together and they are trying to negotiate and resolve their dispute with the help of a third party. And therefore, it may require them to disclose a lot of information that they would not otherwise disclose. Now, therefore, another very critical aspect of mediation is its confidentiality. Normally, we have an agreement to mediate that we enter into before starting the mediation process, where a non-disclosure clause is always included in the agreement to mediate, where we say that no part of the information can be disclosed before any other court or any other forum by any of the parties, and the mediator also cannot be summoned as a witness to depose on what transpired in the mediation. So these are the basic, fundamental conceptual framework within which mediation operates. How does the process work? Sometimes it's, when we talk to people, for example, if we talk to even lawyers and tell them that, look, as mediator, now I do a lot of training, and in the training program, when I tell my trainees that, okay, you're not supposed to tell the parties what to do, the immediate reaction is, then what is our job? What the hell are we expected to do? How can we not tell them what to do? And if we know the answer, why should we not provide them with the answer? Now, that is a typical, that's perfectly human to do that, because we human beings, we listen always to advice, to judge. As we are listening, we are either forming our own opinions or we are thinking of what should be done by this person. So we are always ready with our answers. But in mediation, we are trained to listen, to understand, okay, not to judge, not to advise. So how do we go about this process to achieve a particular result? Because here, Mihir was just sharing with us an example of where parties are not even willing to sit at the mediation table and talk to each other. Now, how do you deal with this situation? How do you get the parties to move beyond that kind of intransigence and get them to sit and talk to each other, or at least talk to the mediator to find a solution? What kind of skills does a mediator require to be able to achieve all these things, to be able to help the parties to talk to each other, to help the parties to understand what their real interests are as opposed to their stated positions, how to help the parties to move beyond their entrenched positions and think of their best interests, understand what the other person's interests are, and work towards a solution that would be beneficial to both sides instead of winning and losing. What kind of skills does the mediator require? And also the most important thing is, how does the mediator refrain from giving advice to the parties or telling the parties what to do? Because the mediator has the answer. The mediator perhaps might be an experienced lawyer or a former judge, or perhaps some chartered accountant who knows what to do about the accounting dispute that is there between the parties, an engineer who perhaps knows what should be done to resolve this issue between the parties. It might be anybody. But how does the mediator control that urge not to tell the parties what to do? So what kind of skills does a mediator need? Now, how I see it and how normally mediators feel or trainers feel that what kind of skills should be imparted to somebody who's aspiring to be a mediator. We call them as the 3 Ps. First, the people skills. Number 2, the process skills. And number 3, the problem solving skills. So what are these people skills that we are talking about? People are in conflict. Emotions are very high. Now, talking about emotions, we all know how much of the emotional part of it is taken cognizance of in a litigation mechanism, because emotions have no role to play over there. Parties might be seething with anger, they might be very frustrated, they might be sad, but nobody's bothered about that. But in mediation, that becomes very important, because unless you help the parties to deal with their emotions and go beyond the point where the irrationality gives place to some rational thinking, how do you make them do that? How do you deal with their emotions? And the bigger challenge there is that, how do you deal with your own emotions when you're mediating a dispute? Because there might be, just to give you an example, yesterday, I was in Hyderabad. I was telling you that mediation and in an arbitration, a dispute, the arbitrator convinced the parties to go for mediation. And I was talking to one of the parties, and that is one of the groups. And one lady in that group was trying to tell me something, and I was just reframing it and trying to restate what she was saying, so that to make sure that I understood. She lost patience and she did that. So I just paused for a minute. I said, ma'am, looks like you're not very happy with the way I'm doing things, or maybe you feel that I have not understood it. So what is that gesture tell? I mean, that gesture tells me that you're frustrated with the whole thing. Now, what can I do to help you to understand what I'm doing? So would you like me to explain to you what I'm trying to do? She said, no, I'm telling you something and you're not understanding, you're repeating the same thing again. I said, ma'am, look, you're giving me a proposal. Okay, you're placing something on the table. Now I have to carry this to the other party. I have to tell the other party what exactly you're trying to tell me. Now, unless I understand this, that this is what you mean, what happens if I go and convey the wrong information? Because most of the confusion comes in communication when we are unable to understand what the other person says. Okay, because we misconstrue many times, in mediation training programs, we play a game called Chinese whispers to help people understand how defective our listening capacity is, and how defective our ability to retain information and to reproduce it in the correct way. So we tell them a story. Okay, for example, I always tell a story that I went for a walk once, and I was walking very fast, and there was this young girl who was wearing a red color tracksuit, who was running, who was jogging slowly, and then there was a bull coming from the opposite direction. So that's how the story goes. And what happens is, by the time we select 7 people, so we ask 6 people to wait out. We tell the story to one person. We ask them to repeat that story to the second person is asked to repeat the story to the third. By the time it reaches the seventh person, the story either gets completely diluted or completely distorted. So the whole story never gets complete. So I explained to her this and I said, the only thing I'm trying to do here is trying to understand whether I have understood you correctly. So that once you confirm to me that yes, you have understood it correctly, then it becomes easier for me to go and talk to the other party and tell them that this is what this party is saying. So then she understood and she immediately calmed down. So you see how the emotions sometimes become so unmanageable for parties that they can easily get frustrated because they have been through a whole process of, a lot of very, conflict interaction that has taken place between them. Sometimes it would be so hurtful to them, or it might affect them so deeply that they are just not able to see anything rationally after that. So this is where, it becomes very important to have those people skills, to be able to communicate with them effectively, to be able to listen to what they are trying to say, to be able to understand what are the meanings behind those words, because words might mean something, but the words might be something, but the meaning might be something different. So it's not just the words, it's also the body language, how they are saying. What is the tone of voice that they're using while they're communicating? Like, for example, if I tell you a very simple sentence, if I ask you to write it down on paper, if you can do that, just write down, I never sold that horse to you. I never sold that horse to you. Now, believe me, if I ask each one of you what this sentence conveys to you, each one of you will give a different interpretation of that very simple sentence, which has a subject and a predicate. That's all. It's a very simple sentence. It's not a complex sentence. We don't have the time. Otherwise, we would have done that exercise here. But if I ask you, each one of you will give me a different meaning of that. Now, some of you may say that it means that I never sold that horse. Now, some of you may say, I never sold that horse to you, which means I have never, it's not my business to sell horses. I've never sold a single horse. Some might say, I never sold that horse to you. I gifted it to you or you stole it from me. Some of you may say, I never sold that horse to you. Some of you may say, I never sold that horse to you, to somebody else. Now, what happens is when you're listening to the tone of voice, it conveys to you the correct meaning. If I say, I never sold that horse to you, it was Taruka who sold the horse to you. I never sold that horse. It's not my business to sell horses. I've never sold a single horse in my life. I never sold that horse to you. I never sold that horse to you. You stole it from me, or I gave it to you as a gift, or I hired it to you. I never sold that horse to you. I sold you a white horse and you're showing me a black horse. I never sold that horse to you. I sold you a donkey, I sold you a cow, I sold you a buffalo, but no, not a horse. I never sold that horse to you. I sold it to Sonal. And you stole it from Sonal and you're saying that I sold it to you. So you see how the meaning changes depending on where the emphasis is, what's the tone of voice. And body language plays a very important role in speaking, because there was I think a scientist or a psychologist called Albert Maharabian. He came up with this, what is called as the Maharabian Principle, where he said that 7% of communication are the words, 38% are the tonality, the tone of voice that you use, and 55% is conveyed through body language. So if I come to your house, I'm sitting on your chair, you offer me a chair, I'm wriggling, I'm very uncomfortable, and you ask me, Jawad, are you okay? And I say, yeah, I'm okay, because I'm very polite, I'm a nice guy, I don't want to tell you that your chair is lousy. So I tell you, yeah, it's okay. But scene two, I come to your house, you give me a very comfortable chair to sit, I'm very happy sitting in that chair, and you ask me very politely, Jawad, are you okay? I say, I'm okay. Now, but if you're watching keenly, in the first instance, you would have seen me squirming and feeling very uncomfortable and my face distorted. And if you ignore that and pay attention to my words alone, it conveys a completely different meaning to you. Okay, so these are all the skills that mediators need, these communication skills, where you need to listen first to understand what is being said, the ability to ask the right kind of questions to the parties without jumping to conclusions or assuming that this is what the party would have meant, or this is what this person is telling me, or drawing your own conclusions. So it's always good. So you learn the skills of, sometimes parties in conflict will have their own way of expressing things. Like, for example, if let's say there's a partner sitting before you, and the partner is saying, sir, my partner is a crook, is a cheat. He's not at all transparent in his dealings. He suppresses information, he manipulates accounts, he cheats customers. Now, this is very toxic language that is being used by one of the partners. Now, what this partner is doing is he is identifying the other partner as the problem. Now, what becomes important here is for the mediator to reframe what this party is saying. So you simply reframe by saying that it's very important for you that your business should be run in an honest and transparent manner. And the goodwill of your customers is also important. So what you're doing is you're shifting the focus from something which is very, very negative, which is actually putting the blame on somebody for some kind of a conduct that this person's perception tells him that this person is guilty of. So you're reframing the whole thing. What you're doing is you're taking that message, the message that what this person really needs is, to be transparent, to be honest in the business, to run the business in a proper way. You just convey that message, you reframe, you put it in a different frame. A very beautiful example of that, you can see the frame behind me, right? It's a virtual background, by the way. It's not a real painting. But imagine this picture, such a beautiful picture. Imagine it in a frame which is, moth-eaten, which is decaying, which is just falling off, very old. And you touch it, it's termite-ridden. So do you throw away the painting? Or do you throw away the frame? You simply take the painting out of that frame and put it in a brand new frame. I realized the effect of this reframing when, in actual fact, I went to my sister's house. I had been to my sister's house earlier, and she does these clay. With clay, she creates a lot of sceneries and stuff and all that. And when I first saw that work, which was not framed, I was not very impressed with that. Then the next time I went, she had got those things framed. And when I looked at that with the frame, it looked so beautiful that I bought 3 or 4 of them from her and put them up in my house. So we as mediators, we learn how to reframe that, what the parties are saying, so that we change their focus from the negative to the positive. So handling people, handling their emotions, and there's something called empathy and self-restraint also. That's basically constitutes what is known as emotional intelligence. So a mediator has to have that emotional stability, first of all, to deal with people's conflicts, to understand conflicts, to be aware of his or her own flashpoints, his or her own biases under which we operate at many times, because those biases, those cognitive biases sometimes exist in our subconscious. You may not be aware of them. So emotional intelligence is something that helps you to recognize your own biases. It helps you to recognize your own flashpoints, helps you to control yourself when you're on the verge of saying something which may not be very productive or which may not be good, which may hurt the other person. So it's not only your own emotions, you're also, need to have the intelligence to deal, emotional intelligence to deal with the other person's emotions. So where empathy plays a very significant role. So handling people is a skill that a mediator gets trained to acquire those skills. And it's a lifelong exercise. You continue to keep practicing that. It's not enough if you just attend a 40-hour session and you're told that, okay, you need to be emotionally intelligent, you need to have empathy, you need to have self-restraint, you need to reframe, you need to restate, you need to summarize, you need to clarify. All these things are very good, but you need to keep practicing that. The more you practice that, you acquire those skills. The second important aspect are the process skills. How should the process be structured? Now, there's a very funny video on YouTube. You can just go to YouTube and type out funny chocolate ads. There's a chocolate called JAP, Japp, and there's an ad of that chocolate where there's this gentleman who's gone for a jog. He's coming back and he's leaning over his very expensive car and trying to stretch. And there's a person who's munching on this Jap chocolate. So he's driving a truck and coming. So the car is parked over the edge of a cliff. So this guy just walks down from the truck, goes there and pushes the car over the cliff. And before this man says Jack Robinson, the car is fallen off the cliff. So the reason for that is because you don't ask the question, what do you need? Why are you doing this? So unless you understand the needs of the parties who are before you, helping them to explore solutions would be ridiculous, right? So there is a stage called the exploration stage. But before the exploration stage, there is also a stage where you need to explain to the parties what they can expect in this process. Most people don't know what the mediation process is all about. So there's something called the mediator's opening statement, where the mediator explains the process to the parties, tell them that, look, it's a voluntary process. It's a confidential process. You don't have to worry about anything. You can walk out of this. Now, when you give them that autonomy to the parties, the power to walk out of the process, that makes them feel that, okay, let's sit and try, because after all, we can walk out of it anytime. So you explain the confidentiality that infuses them with the confidence that helps them to build the trust in you. Okay, so they start trusting you in that. Then you explain to them that it's not going to affect them in any way. When they reach an agreement, that agreement will be the final thing that will govern the relationship. And until then, anything that is discussed will be without prejudice to their rights and interests. And then you lay down the ground rules. You say that, when you speak with respect to each other. Don't be impolite or don't use any rude language, and listen to the other person without interrupting. So very basic fundamental rules of communication. So when you say all this, the manner in which the mediator conveys this to the parties helps the parties to develop the trust in the mediator, to understand the process, and to have the confidence to go through the process. And then the mediator embarks upon the exploration. So the mediator tries to understand, gets as much information from the parties. And it is not just the substantive information. What is the substantive aspect of the dispute? But the mediators go beyond that and try to explore how this has impacted the parties emotionally. So we even go to the extent of asking parties, so how did this impact you? How did this affect you? So what do you think needs to be done to address that? So keep on exploring. So unless and until you get all the information, not only what are the substantive issues that are at stake, but also what are the underlying fears of the parties? What are their deep-rooted concerns? What is driving this conflict? How has the communication been between the parties? How can that communication be improved between the parties? So all these things you explore, you do it in joint sessions, you do it in private sessions, because there might be some confidential information which somebody may not like to share in the presence of the party with whom they are in conflict. So you provide them with private sessions, you assure them about the confidentiality of that. Okay, you tell them that every information that they give in the private session would be kept confidential. So you gather all this information, and then that helps you to understand what are the issues that need to be resolved. Now, many of you as practicing lawyers may have seen how the courts frame the issues. What relief is the plaintiff entitled to? How much money should be paid? What is whether any compensation is payable or not? So these will be the issues. But in mediation, emotional issues can also be part of the issues. Something like an apology can be a part of an issue. Okay, what should be done about this particular, emotional impact that it has caused to the party? So how can this be resolved? So these are all the issues that you sit with the parties and frame these issues so that you are focused, so that you're clear that, okay, these are the issues on which we are going to be discussing. So once you have the issues before you and parties confirm that, yes, these are the important things for us, and these, answering these issues will help us to, do what is best in our interest and will fulfill our needs. Then you move them into the negotiation stage. So that negotiation stage becomes a very critical stage because essentially mediation is nothing but a facilitation of the negotiation between the parties. And a mediator is basically a facilitator of the negotiation between the parties. Now, how do you go about that? First and foremost, you need to be a good negotiator. Because when you are a good negotiator, you know what are the tactics that parties are going to be using in the course of a negotiation. So some people might be very confrontationist. They will indulge in a very adversarial kind of negotiation. So it might be, very position based. Now, how do you move them from that? Help them to understand what their interests are. Shift their focus from the person to the problem. Now, these are all the negotiation skills that the mediator needs to possess. So what kind of questions will elicit the right answers? Okay, how should you explore their underlying interests? What is important for them? How do you help them to generate multiple options? How do you help them to test those options? If a party is making an offer and I straight away take the offer to the other side and say, this is what this party is offering. Now the answer would be, who the hell is he to offer me this? And how does it meet my needs? It doesn't. So when I'm taking an offer, before I take the offer to the other party, I sit and test that offer with this party. Is it a specific offer? I'm willing to pay compensation. Fine. How much? What is the quantum? And why have you agreed to pay? Are you clear about this in your mind? And how are you going to mobilize the money for this? So is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it something that is achievable? Is it within the means of this party to fulfill that? If it takes the form of an agreement between the parties, whether it is a realistic offer. If my wife comes back to me, sir, I'm willing to take her to the moon. Are you Richard Branson or Elon Musk? Is it realistic? What is the time frame within which we are talking about? Within a year, I'll pay the compensation. So what is the date? Can we agree upon a precise date? So you test the offer before you take it to the other person. Okay. So many times what we mediators do is, especially in the stage of negotiation, we keep the parties separately because parties have, we all suffer from these cognitive dissonance or cognitive biases. There are various biases, like we have anchoring bias, we have reactive devaluation. I can't go too much deep into that because it will take a long time. We have an assimilation bias. There are any number of biases that exist in the realm of psychology. So we are all victims of those biases, and this is how we respond to offers. We respond the way we respond to the way we make offers, the way we explore the possibilities of resolution. So all these things are taken care of by the mediator. So the mediator literally works as a shuttle diplomat, walking from one party to the other party, trying to encourage the parties to generate multiple options, to see how we can move the parties from what is known as distributive bargaining to integrative bargaining. I think all of you would have heard this famous story of the orange. It is repeated ad nauseum by everybody who talks about mediation. So I'm also going to repeat it here. Sorry to inconvenience you. If you have already heard the story, it doesn't matter, but it's a very useful story to explain. Okay, so what is the meaning of distributive bargaining and integrative bargaining? So the story goes something like this. There were two sisters. They were fighting for an orange. So both of them wanted an orange. And they go to the mother. And the mother has a few options before her. She can take the orange and tell them, get lost. Okay, since you're fighting, the punishment is none of you get the orange. The second option for the mother is, okay, both of you want the orange, here's the answer. I'm cutting it into half and I'm giving it to both of you. Take one half each and stop fighting. The third option for the mother is asking the daughters, yes, daughter number one, what are you going to do with this orange? And who knows, the daughter may say, I need the peel for making marmalade out of it. And the second daughter may say, I need the pulp because I want some juice out of it. And here the needs of both of them are met. because they have different interests or overlapping interests. The position is they want the orange. The question is, why do they want the orange? That discloses their interests and needs. And so what they need is something totally different from what the other person needs. So that is, in a sense, integrative bargaining. And there's a very famous story of the 17 camels, and where this man, I think, had some, how many brothers was that? Yeah, three sons he had. And he had 17 camels. And he wrote in his will that my eldest son will get 1/2 of the camels, and the second son will get 1/9 of the camels, and the third son will get 1/18 of the camels. So half, 1/3, and 1/9. That is how he gave that division. And now they didn't know how to, because if you divide those numbers, you won't get the answer unless you cut some of the camels into half. So the brothers started fighting with each other, and they go to this wise old lady who's there. And she tells them that, look, I have one camel, take it with you. And they bring it back with them. They're still fighting. And the youngest one, youngest are always very intelligent. I don't know how many of you are the youngest, but I'm the eldest. So I realize that my youngest one is more intelligent than me. So they come back, and then they say that, okay, we have 18 camels. So 1/2 of 18 is how much? It's 9. So the elder brother gets 9. 1/3 is 6. The other brother gets 6. 1/9 of 18 is 2. So the last brother gets 2. And there's one more camel left, because if you add 9 plus 6 plus 2, it comes up to 17. So they go and return the camel to the lady. So integrative bargaining is adding value to what is already on the table, expanding the pie. So a mediator has to brainstorm those options with the parties to see how they can expand the pie instead of getting stuck on a fixed pie assumption. So these are the techniques that mediators use. And once they are able to get the parties on the same wavelength and agree upon a certain offer that would be acceptable to both of them, then the stage of entering into the agreement comes. So this process skill becomes very important. And what I was talking to you about, how the negotiation is facilitated, is the problem solving skill, the third P that we spoke about. So as a mediator, you need to have those people skills to deal with parties, to deal with people's emotions, to be able to move them to understanding what their real interests are, to be able to identify what the real issues that are plaguing the parties, and then take them into the problem solving stage, have the structure of the process very clear, because you can't, without understanding the background, without understanding where the parties are coming from, without understanding the fears and concerns of the parties, if you jump into negotiation, it's not going to work out. It's going to end in a fiasco. So it's very important that you follow the process. So process skills become important. So basically, a mediation process, the way it is structured, is designed to lead to a result where, even if there is no settlement between the parties, at least they are set upon the path of thinking collaboratively, of understanding what their underlying interests are. Perhaps at that point of time, they may not have the solution ready-made, in spite of all your best efforts. But at a later point of time, something happens and they settle it between them. It has happened with me many times. And particularly in one case I was dealing with, it was a trademark dispute that was before the court. It was referred to mediation. And later on, we found out, as the mediation progressed, as we continued to explore the interests of the parties, we realized that the trademark dispute was essentially between the same family, two branches of the same family. And the actual, how the dispute arose was with reference to the control of the place where the founder was buried. Because the founder was a very reputed man in their town. And it was a matter of great prestige for each branch of the family to have control of that place. So different options were explored. But ultimately, because we have a time limit also in the court annexed mediation program, we have some 60 days time plus another 30 days. So the time was not enough. And the matter went back to court without a settlement. 1 month later, the lawyer called me and said, Jawad, the matter has been settled. And it was on the same lines that we discussed in the mediation. So what basically happened in my perception was that through this process, I think we were able to set them on that path of conciliation, on the path of collaboration, change their mind from a very adversarial frame of mind to something that was more collaborative. So they were able to understand each other's interests. There was a better understanding that developed between them that helped them to resolve it at a later point of time. So I always believe that, mediator's job is not to settle the dispute, but to resolve the conflict. You resolve the conflict, the settlement comes. So that is where the structure of the process becomes important. So we divide the process into different stages. First, the mediator's opening statement, whether the mediator explains the process to the parties and does it in a very friendly way, maintaining eye contact with both parties, maintaining an equal distance from both parties in the way you sit with them, okay, the way you look at them with a smiling countenance, put the parties at ease, because we all have mirroring neurons. Parties are going to be in conflict. They're going to be tensed up when they come to you. And that sometimes rubs off on you. So you have to be aware of that and make sure that your relaxed mood rubs off on the parties. So that becomes very important. Okay, so they start mirroring. After some time, they start mirroring your relaxed way of dealing with things, or relaxed way of talking, and they start reciprocating in that manner. So the hostility gets dissipated to a large extent, depending on just how you behave. Okay, how you speak, how you talk, how you your body language, your facial expression, your smile. So all these things help the parties to really, it changes their mood basically. So first the opening statement of the mediator, then the opening statement of the parties. First they start off with their positions, and then you go on asking them questions. You keep exploring them. You exploring what actually drives this, what has actually happened. Ask for clarifications. Summarize what they say so that they get an understanding that yes, you have understood what they're saying. Reframe what they're saying to put them in a proper perspective, to focus more on the issue rather than the person. So you keep doing all these things in the exploration stage. Once you finish the exploration stage, which is the second stage, you go to the third stage, that is developing the agenda for discussion or identifying the issues that need to be resolved. So once you have that clarity in the minds of the parties that, okay, these are the matters that are affecting us, and these are the issues that on which we need to discuss and find a solution, then it becomes easier for you to go into the step of negotiation. So negotiation is quite a complex process, which I may not be able to explain to you in another 5 minutes also. It will take a long time. There is something called principled negotiation. There's a beautiful book, Getting to Yes, by Roger Fisher and William Ury. If you're an aspiring mediator or a negotiator, that book is sort of a Bible, I think, which we all need to read. So reading that book will give you a perspective of what is principled negotiation. So basically, they say that there are 4 principles of principled negotiation. One is focus on the interest, not on the positions. The second thing is generate multiple. There are, I'm mixing up these, but first is, separating people from the problem. The second is focus on the interest, not on the positions. The third is invent multiple options so that if you get stuck on one option, the other option can be explored. If you get stuck on only one option, it's very easy for parties to get disappointed and walk away. So before you start exploring an option, invent multiple options. Help the parties to brainstorm and come up with multiple options and then discuss each one of them. So one of them might click with the parties. So invent multiple options. The fourth thing is evolve objective criteria. Because all those biases that we spoke about, people have a habit of either, overvaluing what they have or undervaluing what the other person is offering. So we always try to evolve an objective criteria. Let's say that a dispute is about the value of a property. Now, ask the parties, can we agree upon, I had a dispute where there was a conflict between two partners on the accounting. And each of them had their own auditors who were giving them conflicting views of the accounts. So I told them that would it help if we refer it to a reputed auditing firm who would look at it objectively and give you a report, so that will help you to understand what exactly went wrong with the accounts. And they both agreed. So that is what is called as objective criteria. So evolve objective criteria for them to, evaluate whatever their offers are. So these are four principles that spoke. Then there are other, there are elements of negotiation, how the communication between the parties is, what kind of relationship they have, what are the, what is their commitment to that, what are the alternatives, what we call as BATNA and BATNA. BATNA is best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What happens if they walk out of the negotiation? What are the alternatives that are there before them? How long is it going to them for them to achieve what they are setting out to achieve? Is it better to negotiate? Is that offer which is being offered, is the offer that is being made in the negotiation, is it better than what they would get outside if they walk out of this? So help them to understand what their best alternatives are, what their worst alternatives are. So that will show them, that will get them committed to the negotiation. So there are 7 elements of that. So that's quite a detailed subject. We cannot go into it. So basically, this is how a negotiation process is structured. So we have opening statement, exploration, identification of the issues or developing the agenda, negotiation, and agreement. So Mihir, I will just stop here.
All right. That was a wonderful exploration about the process of mediation and some of the most important skills. Jawad, I personally have 2 questions that I have struggled to answer when I have been questioned about that. First is, what exactly does a mediator do? And the second is, this could probably take more time, but why is only facilitative mediation considered to be mediation and not evaluative mediation? Because uh, I know you have been a part of these discussions. I have been a part of these discussions where it has been the experience that Indians prefer evaluative mediation more than facilitative. So if you could throw a little bit of light on these 2 aspects about, firstly, what does a mediator exactly do? Because in your discourse right now, you said that the mediator facilitates the negotiation, but it sounds like jargon to most people.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, and the second is evaluative versus facilitative.
Okay. Okay, so that's a good question, Mihir. But I think what I explained how the process works has the answer for your question, because one, the mediator first puts the parties at ease. Okay. Secondly, through a process of very strategic questioning, he helps the parties to understand what their real interests are. Okay. So just to give you an example of that. Okay, now there is a case of, I was dealing with the case of defamation, okay, where a political leader had been defamed by a magazine. That was his contention, that there was something very uh, unflattering that was published by the particular magazine, and he sued them for defamation. So now the problem here is he's claiming damages. So his position is, I want him to compensate me for the loss of reputation that I suffered. Now, as we explore more and more, and as we keep asking the questions, the truth came out. That's how the money is not important for me. What is important for me is I need my reputation to be cleared. So that's the underlying interest. So what the mediator does is helps the parties to understand what their underlying interests are by exploring this with them. Okay. Let's say a matrimonial dispute, for instance, where, child custody is as an issue. Okay? Or maybe where, the treatment of either of the spouses has been very bad. Now, basically, the parties come out with a lot of hatred towards each other. So now what the mediator does is takes them back to the past, helps them to understand how the relationship was, helps them to explore where this thing started, what actually triggered this, helps them to understand that, okay, what actually happened? Was there any miscommunication between them? Was the communication between them good or was it toxic? What can they do to help to improve that communication? How can they develop a better understanding with each other? So basically, you take them through this process by asking them the right questions. Okay, so questions is, what is important for you in this? Is it important that you get the compensation? Or is it important that you clear your reputation? Now, between these two, which would you prefer? Now, if he says, I want to clear my reputation, then the next stage comes. How would you like to do that? I want the other person to tender an unconditional apology, publish it in his magazine. So you go to the other party and say that, what can we do to set right what is the damage that has been caused to the other person? Have you got any ideas? Would you like to publish an apology? Now he says that, look, if I publish an apology, my credibility goes. But I'm willing to do anything that is needed to clarify that, okay, to clear this person's reputation. So what are the options now before you? How can we do that? You want an apology. He is unable to publish his apology because his credibility is at stake. Can we agree upon a mechanism by which, both these results can be achieved without compromising your interests and which would serve both your interests? So you want to put an end to the suit by whatever method that you want to clarify or clear the reputation of the other man. And the other man doesn't want to continue with this because for him, the money is not important. For him, it is more important that his reputation is clear. So what are the options before us? So one of the options that emerged in this case was that the political leader would give a statement clarifying his position. And this magazine will carry it very prominently and also put on the cover that for this this article that came out on so and so date, so and so has clarified, and his clarifications at page so and so. So that people go to that page and read it. So that was an option that was acceptable to both parties. Now, in this, if you see, there was no element of evaluation at all. There was no suggestion given by the mediator. All the mediator did was ask questions to the parties, explored what their interests are, understood their interests, explored what are the options before them, and help them to come to an option that would be acceptable to both of them. Now, the second question that you asked, why not be evaluated? That's a very good, very interesting question that, many times all mediators have asked themselves because they reach a point in a mediation where they feel that a suggestion from them would help the parties to, resolve this. Because parties are basically, in principle, they're willing to resolve. So that willingness has come about, but they don't know how to go about it. So the question is, can the mediator tell them what to do? Now, if the mediator tells them what to do, it becomes evaluated. Now, the essence of mediation is self-determination, as I made it very clear before. Now, why self-determination is important in mediation vis-a-vis other dispute resolution processes? You challenge an arbitral award. You appeal against a judgment of the court. But in mediation, there is an element of finality because it is your decision, not somebody else's. So how do you make that happen? How do you make it your decision? The only way to do it is to make it facilitative or maybe transformative, but certainly not by telling them what to do. But going back to the situation that I said, that parties in principle They have reached that spirit of understanding and collaboration where they're willing to resolve it, but they just simply don't know how to go about it. And the mediator has the answer. Again, let me take you back to the example that I gave of the defamation case. Now, this suggestion came from me about publishing the clarification, and here's how I did it. I said, one of the options perhaps that both of you may consider, if it appeals to you, is what happens if A gives you a clarification and you carry it in your magazine? Would that help to, serve both your interests? Would you like to think about it? And they said, well, that looks workable. I said, if it is workable, then let's do one thing. If you feel it is workable, I'll give you some time, go back, think about it. Maybe one of you can work upon the clarification, how it should be framed, exchange with each other. And if you feel that it is workable, you come back and tell me, and then we'll go ahead with that. Now here, what I was doing is I was putting an idea in their mind, but I was giving them the power to say no to that. Now, when they choose to say yes, it becomes their decision. So here, what am I? I'm being very careful here because I want it to be their decision. And I want them to have that power to say no. I'm not telling them that why just issue a clarification. I hope I'm able to explain the difference with him.
Yes, yes, definitely.
So, as you rightly said, in our culture, many times what happens is people expect, they look up to you because they put you in the place of a judge, and they want you to tell them what to do. Now, the temptation is very great for us because we are basically a high context society, and we love to advise people. We love to tell people what to do. Okay, so the temptation is great, but that is where the mediator has to watch out, because mediator cannot compromise on the concept of self-determination, because that is the very essence of mediation. That is what, see, the parties have to own the solution because they own the problem and they have to own the solution also. So the best way to give them that ownership of the solution is to make that solution come from them. So it should be their solution. So even if you're suggesting something, give them that autonomy to say no. So it's always better that you place 2 or 3 options before them and tell them that choose one of them which appeals to you. Think about it. And if you feel it works for both of you, then let us go ahead with that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful explanation. I'm sure that I will be able to use this. Because what happens is when people ask me about, okay, what do you exactly do in a mediation? It's never a short answer. I have to go into this entire spiel about what a mediator does, what is the objective of a mediation. And but although it's long, it is necessary to explain it. Otherwise, people just think, oh,
No,
then
Mihir, sorry to interrupt you, but what happens is you would have already explained this in your opening statement. So, and they have reached a point where they fully trust you, okay? And they want you to do something to help them.
yes.
Okay, so when you tell them that, look, I have a very hands-off approach, I can't do anything about this, then what happens is sometimes they may lose faith. Okay,
Correct.
so they are stuck there because they have reached that understanding, they want to resolve. Now, this is where you have to play very carefully, because you don't tell the parties what to do. You tell them that you may consider doing this. Now, you have every right to say no. So you give them that responsibility of deciding whether they want to do it or not to do it.
Yes, exactly. All right. So we have Rupal Devi here as a participant, and she had asked a question. Rupal, would you like to just directly ask the question to Jawad, or would you like me to do it for you?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, actually, I want to know that
Okay,
is
Rupal,
mediation
Rupal, can I just ask you to start your video, please?
Second, sir.
Yes, Rupal?
Sir, I want to know that is there is a process like that is this compulsory to file in the court first for go to mediation? And why should dispute resolution? Why should not go for
No, there is no necessity that you should go to the court to go for mediation. See, now there is something called pre-litigation or pre-institutional mediation. Okay, so the whole idea of trying to make mediation as a mainstream dispute resolution process is to help the parties to resolve their disputes or conflicts without the necessity of going to court. So we have two stages here. One is before the parties go to the court, they go for mediation, they try to resolve it. If it fails, they go to the court. If it succeeds, they have an agreement. The second option is you go to the court. If you have not already explored the prospect of mediation, you go to the court, and then the court tells you that, look, why don't you go for mediation? So both possibilities are there, but there is no compulsion that you have to go to court to go for mediation.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank
So
you, Rupal, for
mediation should
asking the
always be the
question.
first option for you.
All right. So Jawad, we had one more participant. He had actually logged in and he had sent in his question. It was Mr. Venkata Ramana Koduri.
Okay.
He had asked the question as to why mediation as an alternative to litigation is yet to catch up in India.
That is thanks to about 300 years, I think more than 200 years of colonial legacy of the court system that has been bestowed on us, number one. Number two, I had mentioned that we are a high context society. A high context society is basically a very hierarchical society. Okay. And what happens is we always look up to authority. We always feel that somebody else takes the decision, it's good for us. And we come from a society where, just to give you a small example, our parents decide whom we should marry, when we should marry, how we should marry, how many people should come for the wedding, and also when we should consummate the marriage. So all this is decided in a very hierarchical way. Okay, so obviously we are scared of taking decisions ourselves, and we look up to somebody in authority. So we want that chapa, that approval from somebody in authority to say that, okay, you're right and this person is wrong. Okay, and we are also a very argumentative society. Okay, please don't think I'm being unpatriotic about this, or don't call me an anti-national, but the only objective is to see we should also face who we are. Okay, this is who we are, nothing wrong with that. So essentially what we, all along, all these years, for more than 200 years, the only system of dispute resolution that we have seen is the court system. We have had our panchayats. Again, those are, most of the times they are adjudicatory. So the panchayat elders tell us what to do or what not to do, who's right and who's wrong. Earlier, we had kings and queens who were sitting in judgment, or village elders who would sit in judgment. But though we had this concept of dialogue in our ancient culture, but that is something that somehow got relegated to the background. And we completely lost touch with our roots. And we started adopting something that was conferred upon us or given to us by the colonial masters. And today, for example, there was an article in the context of the proposed mediation bill. There was an article written by the president of the Madras High Court Advocates Association, where it was carried by the Hindu Business Line, where he said that mandating mediation would be, violating the fundamental principles of justice. So I wrote a reply to that. My article was, I'm not such a big man for Hindu Business Line to carry my article, but Live Law carried it. The article's title is Fear of Mandatory Mediation, Is It Real? So if you are subscribing to Live Law, you can just search for that article. And I have asked this question: what is justice? Is it what is decided by the court alone that can be defined as justice? Why can't it be justice if you and I sit across the table, talk to each other and resolve our dispute? Is that not justice? So when parties are told that, okay, before you go to the court, why don't you try this? Just go for 1 or 2 sessions, sit there, try. If it doesn't work out, come back to the court. Nobody's shutting the doors of the court for you. So all you're saying is, okay, try to resolve it amicably. If it doesn't resolve, then you can always come to the court. So how does it militate against the fundamental principles of justice? So the first thing that we need to do is we need a shift in the cultural paradigm of dispute resolution in India. We need to change our mindset from that adversarial to a collaborative method. And we need to understand that there are non-violent ways, because we are the, we taught the world the meaning of non-violence. And litigation is violence, because litigation is violence by words. And violence by words can be more fatal than violence by sword. Okay, so what we are used to today is a violent method of dispute resolution. So we have to opt for a non-violent method of dispute resolution, which is basically collaborate with each other, work with each other, sit with each other, talk. We need to develop that culture of dialogue. We need to bring back that culture of dialogue.
If I may just add,
Yeah.
why litigate or why mediation doesn't become popular? It's like you said, it's the mindset. And despite the heavy backlog of cases and the huge pendency, people are still unwilling to opt for a method like mediation, where there would be a finality to their dispute. And we have mediation initiative here, but there are so many other entities trying to spread awareness about mediation, and I sincerely hope that all of us succeed in creating this awareness so that the pendency reduces, the conflicts reduce, and overall there is a more peaceful society.
Meher, just one statistic
Sure,
to
sure.
add to that. There are 3.4 crore cases pending in all the courts in India. Okay.
Yes, yes.
And our judge population ratio is a dismal 21:1 million.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if you read about this, but until last week, the Bombay High Court was functioning with less than half its capacity.
Yes, yes. Less than half the capacity. Even the sanction strength is not full in all the courts.
Yes, the
Many
sanction strength
subordinate
of the...
courts are lying vacant. We have tribunals, we have consumer courts. They are all lying vacant because we are not, the members are not being appointed over there. So what is this justice we are talking about is what we need to, really think about.
Of course. All right, if you permit me to move on, I have 2 more questions that I think we can take up, if you don't mind. We have one question from Srishti Rathod. Srishti, would you please unmute and start your video and please ask your question?
Thank you so much, sir. Good evening, Jawad sir. Good evening, Mihir sir.
Srishti, I don't see.
Am I,
Can
sir?
you please
Yes,
turn on your video?
sir. I'm really sorry. I'm not in a, I'm not in an ambience where I should be
Okay.
turning on my video.
All right, no problem.
Thank you so much, sir. So, I have learned a great deal about mediation and everything from me, sir, working under her. I'm working under him. I'm really sorry. So, what we come to know of it, like mediation is not really alike the other forms of formal dispute resolution. And although, like, if we see the disputes that arise between the party, let's take example of, let's say, disputes relating to property and everything, they do require some sort of calculation and logical reasoning to them. Even if we just hand the entire responsibility or the power to make decisions over to the clients themselves, but some sort of logic is required to reach or arrive at a very plausible solution. So, but at the same time, the mediator is not here to help them or assist them into reaching that logical solution or that solution which is rational. At that juncture, sir, how important does it become for a mediator to have good knowledge, good command over psychology, or a good knowledge of psychology, sir?
See, basically what is felt is that a good mediator should have three kinds of expertise. One is the process expertise, how to conduct the process effectively. Number two, a working knowledge of two things. One is behavioral sciences and a working knowledge of law also. Okay. Now, you need not be an expert in law, you need not be a qualified lawyer as such, but you need to know what kind of agreement is workable, what is not workable. Now, even if you don't have that knowledge of law, you can always take the assistance of either the parties' lawyers, or you can tell the parties that why don't we discuss this with some legal expert or some accounting expert or a technical expert. You can always discuss with the parties, and if they consent, you can always tell them that, okay, why don't we get an opinion? Like I was giving you the example of the accounting dispute between two partners. They agreed to go to a reputed firm, which was a neutral agency, and they got the report from that agency and they resolved based on that report. So if there's a dispute in the valuation of the property or the valuation of an engineering work, okay, or there's a dispute on regarding the payment that is pending, and one party says that the value of the work is so much and the other party says no, it is so much. Now, mediator does not necessarily have to be an engineer to go there and value the work, because then the mediator is becoming either a judge or an arbitrator. So what the mediator can perhaps do there, tell them is, when I spoke about the objective criteria, that is what I meant. So you can always tell the parties that, okay, let us, would you be agreeable to refer this to an independent expert who will assess the, the quantum of the work and give its value, or give an opinion on what should be the payment. And if the parties agree, so be it. That can be done. If the parties don't agree, well, they have other methods of dispute resolution. Mediation may not be their answer. Okay. So there's nothing to stop mediators from taking the help of experts. So there are two things here. One, we are talking about domain expertise, and one about process expertise. Now, if you look at which is more important, I would lay more emphasis on the process expertise, which means that mediator should be well acquainted with the process, should know how to conduct the process, should know how to handle the parties' emotions, should be able to explore with the parties what exactly their interests and needs are. That is very important. And if the mediator incidentally happens to have some domain expertise also, it helps in a better understanding of the situation. But if the mediator does not have the domain expertise, there are experts available for that, who can help the parties to come to a resolution that would be acceptable to both of them by applying the concept of objective criteria. Does that answer your question?
Srishti?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it does. The other leg of the question was that in such a circumstance that it becomes really heavy, or maybe the importance of awareness about the psychological aspects of dealing with the clients and other psychological aspects becomes really important. And what is your take on that, sir?
Yeah, my take on that is, mediator does not have to be a trained psychologist or a psychiatrist to understand or go too deeply into the party's psychological situation, because unless and until you find that a party is mentally unstable or incapable of taking decisions because of some perhaps some disability or some challenge that the party is facing mentally, in that case, you can't mediate. Okay, because mediation being a consensual process, it has to be between people who really understand the consequences of their actions. Otherwise, if parties are normal and they are only getting carried away by their emotions or getting carried away by how they have been affected by whatever has happened between them, a little understanding of behavioral sciences, of what triggers behaviors, what triggers certain emotions. For example, if you look at the neuroscience of conflict, which we talk about in our training programs, we explain to the trainees that, okay, there's something called the amygdala, which gets triggered, which actually triggers your body reaction. The physiology in the body gets triggered by this amygdala whenever it sees any physical threat or danger. Now, there are social domains within which the same kind of reaction can be produced. David Rock came out with a paper in 2008, which he called as the scarf model, where he said if status is affected, if certainty is affected, if autonomy is affected, if relatedness is affected, if fairness is affected, it triggers the same kind of reaction as a physical threat or reward. You feel the same anger, you feel the same grief, you feel the same sorrow, you feel the same frustration. All these things, the fear, all these things happen to you even in social domains. Like if somebody speaks disrespectfully to me, I feel that sense of threat. Okay, like how supposing a dog is coming to bite me or something. So it triggers the same kind of physiology in my body. And that leads to a situation where I start reacting. Okay, so a little understanding of this is always very helpful for a mediator. So you're right there that yes, we need some element of this psychological knowledge also, but it need not be too deep a knowledge of psychiatry or the other various nuances of psychology that trained clinical psychologists or psychiatrists may possess. But it is a good field for psychologists and psychiatrists also to practice mediation, to get trained as mediators. So if they learn the process of how to handle conflicts, they can perhaps act as mediators in, for example, couples go to psychologists for, consultation or for, counseling. So there they can apply the mediation techniques to help them to resolve the disputes. So that possibility is there. Now, this is a very developing field and there's a lot of research being done and a lot of interesting things to read on this. There's a lot of material out there on the net. Okay. I hope I understood your question and I answered it correctly. Tell me if I'm
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Indeed. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Srishti.
Thank you so much, Jawad, for that elaborate answer. Rohit, if I may, I just have one more question from Aditya Singh. Aditya, could you please start your video?
Actually, so sorry to interrupt. Actually, I don't have a question. I just wanted to make a very short comment, if I may, on the previous question. Is that okay?
Sure.
Please.
Yeah. So just so we don't break the flow, I just like to step in quickly here. So if I may just add to what Jawad very beautifully explained about being aware of the behavioral sciences. So being somebody from the background of psychology as well. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I've studied it to some depth. And having spoken to some people with more detailed expertise and qualifications in that area, I understand there are 3 or 4 things from the realm of psychology which can definitely help. One is being aware of the whole idea of amygdala hijack. So that's just knowing it conceptually can really help.
Yes.
Also, there are 3 different types of techniques which psychologists very frequently use. So it's the rational emotive behavioral therapy, that's REBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, and neuro-linguistic programming. So these 3 particularly are recommended for anybody who is working with any people, to be honest, but particularly so for mediation. So I just wanted to make that quick comment.
And in fact, NLP training helps a lot in becoming better communicators. So when you're talking to parties, working knowledge of NLP helps you to really, build that rapport with the parties so that you're able to communicate more effectively, understand more effectively what they're trying to say.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Rohit, for that wonderful input. I mean, I remember learning about NLP almost 20 years ago. It's a really fascinating subject.
No, I recently did a course with Joel Lee.
Yes, I actually saw that update of yours. I wanted to participate, but it was just in a
Very
time.
interesting. Very interesting.
Right. All right. Can we just take up one more question? Aditya, are you there?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Can you please turn your video?
Sir, actually, there's no light in the hostel. I'm sitting in the hostel garden.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, sir.
Oh,
all right. Okay. So you're a law student, Aditya?
Yes, sir. I'm
right.
actually studying in National University, Lucknow. And I'm
All
on campus right now. Unfortunately, don't have light in the campus at the moment.
All right, sure. No problem. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Yes. So my question is, I participate a lot in mediation competitions as negotiating parties and even as mediators. I would like to ask, how does a mediator keep themselves calm exhibit patience even when parties start riling up, even when parties are getting emotional, they start digressing from the main issue of the session. How does a mediator compose themselves, does not show anything on their facial expressions, especially because in online meets, that's the most important thing. You do not react suddenly to anything that the parties mention. How does one keep themselves calm in such a scenario?
I think that is where I think focusing on your own emotional intelligence is very important, Aditya. Because emotional intelligence, basically, it comprises of two things. One is your ability to control your own emotions. And number two is ability to understand and empathize with the other person's emotions. Okay. So when it comes to your own emotions, one thing which I found helps me a lot, this is meditation. So I find that whenever I try to meditate every day, at least for 30 minutes I try, okay? So this helps you to really stay calm when you're dealing with stressful situations. And it also helps you to, what you need to be doing is checking on yourself very frequently, especially in a very volatile situation when parties are emotionally very high and they turn around and they start targeting you at times. Okay, and they start finding fault with you because they need somebody, especially people who are called as high conflict personalities. Okay, so they start targeting you, and that becomes a trigger for you to react. And sometimes you get angry, you lose your temper, you hit back at them. Now, that is where the mediator has to be very cautious. Be aware of what is happening to yourself. That is where, as Rohit also pointed out, understanding that this is happening to me because my amygdala is getting triggered and it is hijacking my feeling, being conscious of that. So like, for example, when I'm driving on the road also, if somebody cuts across, my first reaction is to use an abusive word or to chase him or do something. So what I do is at that point of time, I realize that, okay, this is what is happening to me, and this is how my amygdala is making me react. I need to calm myself. So taking some deep breaths at that time helps me to just calm down. So these are just some practical things that you can do. Okay, there's no magic wand as such to make you suddenly emotionally intelligent. You need to meditate. You need to understand the effect of correct breathing. And this, breathing deeply when you're upset or angry helps you to really calm down. So these are some of the things that I use whenever I feel triggered. I won't say that I have reached a stage of total nirvana, but I'm trying to reach there. I don't know whether I will ever be able to.
Thank you, sir. I'll definitely take up meditation on a daily basis.
It's very important. Please do.
All right. Thank you so much, Jawad. Do we have any more questions? All right. We don't seem to have any more questions, Jawad. I think that brings us to an end of this wonderful discourse on mediation skills and techniques. I have to really thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you discussed how busy it has been for you over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I have nothing but immense respect for you and about the way you go about your mediation practice. And I have to tell you that we are really honored and feel privileged that you agreed to speak on our platform and share your experience with us, and also talk to everybody about how they could develop their own mediation skills and techniques. As for all the participants, I would like to thank you all for joining this webinar and again participating in this by asking your questions. So we will hope to see you again in the next webinar that we hold from Mediation Initiative. And if you have any questions about anything related to mediation, feel free to get in touch with us. We can obviously help you get in touch with any other mediators, or if you need help in getting any training, or if you wish to have any consultancy done or actual mediation, we can definitely help you do that. So thank you so much again for joining us, and have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful weekend. Hope to see you again very soon. Have a good night.
Thank you, Meher, for the opportunity. It's a real honor for me, honor and privilege to be here on your platform and to be able to share these ideas. Thank you so much. And thank you for the patience of all of the
No,
participants.
it was our pleasure. It was our pleasure. All right. Thank you again, everyone. Bye. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.